Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. Gain valuable insights by attending the podcast, then complete the assessment test to download your certificate. To do this, follow these simple steps. Click on the link in your description to access the session. Create a free account and attend the podcast. After the podcast, take the assessment test and download your certificate. It's easy, and it's free. We highly recommend checking out our subscription. Let's get started.
Like you said, by the time you're done with all the interviews and everything, you probably know about the client more than what the client knows about themselves. And I think that's very critical because I think many companies underestimate their footprint, right? Sometimes as simple as a few remote employees or a big online sales surge could just suddenly create exposures in multiple states that you just didn't know about, right? So, like that continues to happen. Now, clients approach you whenever somebody like a prospect approaches you, you see a lot of things and you've guided a lot of people in a lot of directions. So if I were to ask you that, what are some common red flags or blind spots that you see, things that business often overlook until it's too late?
I think a lot of it is like they don't really know who they are. They haven't spent that time identifying who they are, what they are, where they are. We talk to a lot of clients that are like, we're a service company, right? Services aren't taxable. It's like, well, what's your service? It's like, well, we sell software. It's software as a service. It's like, that's not, I appreciate what you think you are, but that is taxable in about 30 states. That's a problem, right?
Yeah.
And so they just kind of don't really know who they are, what they are, where they are.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like in a lot of the clients that we serve, there's a lot of turnover, right? And so, if you're PE backed, there's a 3 to 5 year run rate. They want to sell that. A new team comes in. There's kind of business is dynamic. And so
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to We're Trying to Figure Out. I'm your host, Saul, and today we're diving into a topic that affects almost every business and often flies under the radar: state and local taxes, or SALT, as we all popularly know it. Joining me is Meredith Smith, partner at TaxOps, who has built her career helping companies untangle the complexities of multi state taxation. Meredith, I'm so glad that you're here. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, all, for having us. It should be fun. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So let's start with your journey. So how did you find yourself focusing on SALT? Was there like a particular moment in your career when you realized this needs way more dedicated expertise?
So it was kind of a matter of opportunity. I am what you could, when I entered the profession over 20 years ago, I knew I wanted to be an accountant. Excuse me. So I took accounting classes in high school. I applied to undergrad as an accounting major. So I knew I wanted to be an accountant.
Nice.
And then when I was looking for internships between my junior and senior year of college, I didn't get anything through the traditional means because I knew I was also going to go get my master's. Because when I thought I was going to work in Chicago. And so at that time, Illinois needed 150 hours. So I knew immediately that I was going to get my master's. So kind of in that time, employers were like, well, you're not going to be immediately eligible for hire after your internship because you have one more year of school and then you're going to do another year of school. And so kind of that junior and senior year, I didn't get an internship. And one of my older brothers is also an accountant, but was with a Big Four firm in state and local tax in Denver. And when I was talking to him, he's like, we were just talking about in our meeting this morning, like, hey, should we hire an intern? So send me your resume. Let me get you in touch with our partner. And then that's kind of how it started, is just a matter of I wanted to work. I knew I also wanted to do tax. but I didn't know in what area. And then when I kind of moved out to Denver for the summer to work, I was like, this is incredibly interesting. Like,
Yeah.
there's just all of these things. Let's do it. I'm kind of all in. Talked to kind of my performance manager at the time. He's like, hey, why don't you go to University of Denver, get your master's in tax, and then you can keep working for us. So
Yeah.
it was taking advantage of opportunity, but also
Yeah.
just like, it was just fascinating. And
Wow.
it also helped that I worked with like a great team, and, I really had that learning because there was
Yeah.
just so much to learn.
Yeah.
But it was the best kind of thank you, Big Four accounting in Chicago for not hiring me, because I probably would be a Fed tax professional really busy right now in the
Yeah.
fall doing tax returns. So, yeah.
No, and that's really fascinating. Thank you for sharing the journey. And salt, in fact, it's a topic that I often hear a lot of people say that it's almost like an afterthought. Like, but post Wayfair and with the digital commerce, which is just exploded beyond recognition, it's become like impossible to ignore now. So let's talk about today's landscape. What do you think are the biggest misconceptions businesses have when it comes to state and local taxes?
So I think a lot of companies think that they need to be huge in order to
Yeah.
have state and local tax issues. They're, could say, oh, well, I have a building in Colorado, and, all of my employees are here, but that's it.
Mhm.
But that's not the case, right?
Yeah.
We talk to plenty of small businesses that have
Yeah.
state and local tax issues because it's, well, do you sell over the internet? Do you sell through Etsy? Or a marketplace? Do you go traveling for conferences? Do
Yeah.
you go visit your customers? So generally, right, when you're conducting business, you are not just sitting in your one desk in that one city, right? Also, I live in a different city than I work in.
Yeah.
So I am working from home most of the time, but today I'm in the office. So that
Nice.
has, kind of dual cities where I have an obligation, right? There's, some OPT taxes in Colorado. So kind of headcount taxes. There's just any facet of doing things involves kind of those state and local taxes. And generally, right, we talk with businesses, their idea is to make money, right?
Yeah.
And are you really going to prohibit your ability to make money by just saying, well, I'm just going to sit at my desk in my garage in Denver, Colorado? And if
No.
so, like, right? And so you don't have to be big in order to have these obligations.
True. True.
And then something else we talk about with, prospective clients or clients of just like a lot of times people think that they're not going to get caught,
Yeah.
right? So the idea of getting caught doesn't mean that you don't have a duty,
Yeah.
right? And so we often see that like, well, hey, they're never going to catch me, right? I am only $1 million business and all of my employees are here. We all go to the same office in Denver and all of that. But you can just get caught any number of ways, right?
True.
For
True.
example, us as a company, our website developer is in Michigan. So we
Hmm.
sent, because we paid them more than $600, a 1099
Yep.
to them, not an employee, literally does nothing for the company, but we have to give him a 1099 because he built a
Yep.
website for us and it's just Joe in Michigan. And we as a
Yeah.
business got an inquiry that's like, hey, why don't you file a Michigan tax return? So it's like you
Hmm.
just never know. We don't have clients in Michigan. We don't have revenue in Michigan. We don't have employees in Michigan. So for us, we felt really comfortable responding to that nexus questionnaire. But what happens if, from your garage with your few employees or, your small office in Denver, you sold something to someone in Michigan and you have to answer that truthfully under penalties of perjury?
Yeah.
Now what? So you just never know
Yeah.
how you're going to be found.
Do you want to earn CPE credit? Take this course of MyCPE 1 to earn free credit. Click the link in the description to get started.
True, true. And the surprising thing is that Wayfair happened back in 2018, way before the pandemic.
Yep.
Right. So, but I still hear professionals mixing up this thing that in fact, what you're talking about is, I think, what we call physical nexus versus economic nexus. Right. So many people, and like you rightly said, many people just kind of like assume that if they don't have an office or an employee in a state, they're in the clear. But that's not the case anymore, right?
Correct. And what we also find is that reverse is when people say, oh, well, we don't have very many sales in that state, so we don't meet that economic threshold. I had this conversation with a client last week. It's like, yes, but physical presence still exists. Like still having, something in the form of a human inventory, anything physically located in a state is still nexus. They're like, oh, I thought that went, like, why would that be? It's like, well, because we still have Quill and now we have Wayfair on top of that. So it's just kind of all of these things come together that you can't necessarily forget about one because maybe the jurisdictions have evolved to include others.
Yes, very true, very true. And I mean, especially the pandemic, that kind of like, put a lot of people in the fix, because now everybody had to work from home. And that a lot of people were probably also not aware about the exact definition of a physical nexus. So they're like, oh, well, my office is in Georgia. So I will, like, state of Atlanta, Georgia. So I'm like, okay, so that's where I'm supposed to. But like, although I have an employee who has moved all the way back to California to live with his parents, and now he's going to be working from home from there because it's a pandemic. But I don't need to be worrying about California. But there's so many things that come into play there. So very, very interesting, and it's continuing to evolve. So many states, so many legislations. So this is a question that I want to know the answer to, right? How do you approach this patchwork of constantly changing state by state legislations? Because I can only imagine that your clients must be feeling overwhelmed just trying to keep track of all this.
Yes. I mean, we read a lot, right? And
No doubt.
and we, state tax is kind of it's a relationship game, right? Because as, a professional operating in Colorado, I know Colorado really well. I know a lot of states really well. But there's also those nuances, if you've got to take an audit to court, right? Like, I'm not licensed to litigate anything in Pennsylvania, but we have friends, all over the country and, other firms and law firms, other accounting firms, just kind of sole practitioners that, we rely on. And vice versa. So it's just kind of this game of relationships that it's like, hey, we've got our ear to the ground. We know something's happening in, California with their sourcing rules. Hey, can you jump on the phone for a half hour and can we talk through that?
True.
And so, we read a lot, we subscribe to a lot. And unfortunately, also, we are not perfect and we have some bad experiences where we have learned a lesson about, being aggressive. Some states are more aggressive than others, and we lost, right? So those kind of those losing things are learning opportunities, right? And also, as practitioners, we've done work in we've remediated taxpayer historical liabilities in all 50 states in some capacity or another. And, the agents through the voluntary disclosure programs are people, and they are knowledgeable. And we've also kind of reached out to them, to a person, and been like, hey, do you have any thoughts on this? Or we're kind of struggling with this. Any insight? Is there a way that we can fix this taxpayer? Here are their here are their facts, any thoughts. So we just kind of rely a lot on each other as part of a community. And,
Yeah.
there's a lot of conferences, there's a lot of seminars, there's a lot of teachings, and, you can learn a lot just having a beer after a conference, going through those
True.
intricacies and just kind of hanging out and, building those
I'm
relationships.
I'm pretty certain that must have happened to you a lot. Like you go into a conference, you probably give a talk on, like sales and
Mhm.
taxes, and then like you're just like, hey, hey, great talk. Oh, by the way,
Exactly. Um, yeah, and that's
I'm
how
pretty
we've
certain.
met, most of kind of we call them like friends of the firm, right? Those
Yeah,
those
yeah,
colleagues that we lean
yeah,
on. And that's
yes,
one thing just kind of about the profession and this kind of
yeah.
niche that's really helped me there is building
Mm-hmm.
those relationships.
Nice, nice. There are two very interesting things you said. One is that you have developed a community, which I think is very important for any business. You can't just do everything for yourself by yourself. You need to have this dedicated community who are there to support you, whether it be legal or maybe in a certain stage where you don't have that accounting outreach or whatever it may be. But you have that ecosystem in place because that's what makes a business successful. And you also talked about, I really love the point that, we are honest about saying that, hey, we did fail. There was a
Hmm.
time when we failed and we learned from it. And I think that's a very strong thing because, I've heard this that, a person who has always won the battles has never really learned anything new, you know.
Yeah.
So, I think that's a very interesting learning there. That's what makes you you, right? So now let's get practical. All right. When you're helping, so when you're
Let's
helping a
do it.
client, right? Yeah, you're helping a client to develop a SALT compliance strategy. So if that's the case, what are the key elements you focus on first?
So when we talk to new clients, I think the first thing we got to do is really listen to them
Mm-hmm.
and see what's keeping them up at night, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
obviously we are generally don't get introduced to businesses because they're doing things correctly. So they
Right.
obviously knew enough to
Mm-hmm.
know that they had a hole somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so we like to just, listen to them, help, um, just kind of be a sounding board for where their areas of concern are. And then, we've talked to, hundreds, if not thousands of businesses. And so we've heard almost everything. And we can almost always say, yes, it's a big deal, but there's a way, but it's not, right? Because there's a way to fix it. And so we got to listen to them to see what's bothering them, let them know it's okay. And then we start diving in and asking for data and trying to understand their business. And so by the
Right.
time we're done working with a client, we know more about them than they know about them. Right, because we've
True.
talked to, the controller, the CFO, the marketing department,
Yeah.
someone in manufacturing who's running the lines.
True.
Because
True.
we've talked to HR and payroll because we've talked to every single person or gotten data from every single person throughout that kind of, what helps them make money, right?
True. True.
And so, we ask for data and then we kind of, we quantify and tell them like, hey, here are your holes. Here, here's what that can look like dollar wise. If
Yeah.
you might owe Nebraska $15, Nebraska can come find us. It's not that you don't have something out there. We're not telling you to lie. We're not telling you to do all these things, but let's tackle Nebraska after we tackle your $1 million problem in New York. Right.
Yeah.
And so we help guide businesses through, what the law says, but what's really going to apply to them for their business strategy. So,
Yeah.
right, that practical component of, hey, we get it's going to be a long process to be 100% compliant everywhere. And you're never
Yeah.
going to be 100% compliant everywhere because, Sam is going to move from Ohio to Illinois and not tell anyone. And then you have 6 months of payroll that you didn't know about and whatever, right? 100% compliance is not possible.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
Um,
constant tweaking process, right? You got to consistently keep on tweaking it. Yeah.
Right. And then we're going to like kind of help you understand like, well, here's how you can help fix your problems. And here's how we
Yeah.
suggest that you do it that's the most beneficial to you from like a liability perspective and a cost perspective, right? Because, as much as I enjoy helping people, I don't do this for free. I have an overpriced mortgage in the city of Denver. So, right, like we are in the business of making money as well, but not to the
Yeah.
detriment of our clients. And we really just want to
True.
help them like make the best business decision. And that's part of our job is to
Yeah.
not, quote unquote, like waste the client's money fixing a problem that is already going to cost them a lot of money to fix.
True. Very true. Very true. And very rightly pointed out, and whatever you're saying, it makes perfect sense. All right. Because, like you said, by the time you're done with all the interviews and everything, you probably know about the client more than what the client knows about themselves. And I think that's very critical because I think many companies underestimate their footprint, right? Sometimes as simple as a few remote employees or a big online sales surge could just suddenly create exposures in multiple states that you just didn't know about, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like like that continues to happen. Now clients approach you whenever somebody like a prospect approaches you, you see a lot of things and you've guided a lot of people in a lot of directions. So if I were to ask you that, what are some common red flags or blind spots that you see, things that business often overlook until it's too late?
I think a lot of it is like they don't really know who they are. They haven't
Yeah.
spent that time identifying who they are, what they are, where they are.
Mm-hmm.
We talk to a lot of clients that are like, we're a service company, right? Services aren't taxable. It's like, well, what's your service? It's like, well, we sell software. Software as a service. It's like,
Mm.
that's not, I appreciate what you think you are, but
Yeah.
that is taxable in about 30 states. That's a problem, right?
Yeah.
And so they just kind of don't really know who they are, what they are, where they are.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, like in a lot of the clients that we serve, there's a lot of turnover, right? And
Yeah.
so, if you're PE backed, there's a 3 to 5 year run rate. They want to sell that.
Yeah.
A new team
Yeah.
comes in. There's kind of business is dynamic. And
Yeah.
so things happen all the time. People leave all the time. New
Yeah.
services are offered all of the time. So what we find is, right, there's so much transition and then you're starting over from somewhere
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
Um, and not that that's a red flag, but like the evolution of business
True.
can be, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
True. True. No, I agree to you there. I completely agree to you there. I know, like I said, these are common. I'm not saying that these are the only ones, but these are some consistent things that you see across the board. And, you know, since the pandemic, remote work has changed significantly in the recent years. So, how is it reshaping solved conversations with your clients?
and yeah, Saul, you had kind of brought it up where it's like, well, I was in Atlanta and now I want to live in California. And I'm gonna move, right? There's,
Yeah.
boots on the ground. And you have a lot of people bought things over the internet, you know,
Yeah.
as part of the pandemic and, you know, remote work also. It's like we have some clients that like didn't have laptops. So all of a sudden you're
Yeah.
like buying, going from a desktop to a laptop and now you have property in
Yeah.
pick a county, right? So you might have a
Yeah.
property tax filing. And so as soon as you kind of deconsolidate any of your activities, and also I ordered a lot of stuff online because I couldn't go to
Yeah.
the store or it was just the store didn't have it or whatever it was. My
Whatever.
kids were
Yeah.
my kids were home and I couldn't leave the house because I wasn't going to haul them and right. There's a lot of
Yeah.
logistics into going to a store. And so
Yeah.
we kind of created a consumer mindset of just people sending stuff to us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what does that do from an economic perspective? Drives up your online sales.
Yeah.
And kind of back in 2020, we had a lot more states that had that 200 $100,000 in sales or 200 transactions was
Yep.
what kind
Yep.
of the the threshold that came out of,
The
you know, South
threshold.
Dakota v. Wayfair. If you sell 240, you know, $20 hair ties, you are far below the $100,000 threshold. But in 20 states, that means those 200 hair ties that you sold created nexus in that state, which means now you have a duty to collect. How are you going to collect? You need to know you're collecting the right rate. You got to get licensed. If you get a sales tax license, do you need an income tax license? Oh, I forgot that Joe moved to California. Now I have a payroll license that I maybe didn't think I did because I had pick a reason, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that deconsolidation just means that, you know, you have to look at what you're doing where, and then what happens if, you know, Alaska at the beginning of the year got rid of their, kind of some of the locals that are in the kind of group filing got rid of their transaction threshold. So it's like, well, I had 250 transactions last year. That's not a rule anymore, but I don't have 100,000 in sales. So what am I going to do? Do I close my license or do you just say, well, I'm just going to keep filing? Or, you know, the rules changed. I had nexus under the old rule, but not the new rule. Now what? Should I
Yeah.
comply? Should I not? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Very, very interesting. Now, I even seen startups. I mean, this is something that I've seen a lot in a lot of startups that don't really have any physical office at all. They're just like fully distributed teams, and suddenly they are triggered nexus in half a dozen states without even realizing it for the issues that you just pointed out. So, what would you advise the digital first companies? Because I guess that's a term that's been used a lot. We are a virtual company. You know, a company has gone through a digital transformation now. Everybody's working from home or hybrid or whatever. So, what advice would you give to those digital first companies, say SaaS based businesses or e commerce brands with distributed teams, to prioritize right now when it comes to compliance?
So if you have the opportunity, I would say start early, right? Talk to someone, know what you should kind of look out for. You know, when do we create critical mass? You know, what are my duties? And if I do something here, are there long-term impacts? Right? You're
Yeah,
still going to designate a headquarters, right?
yeah,
Like the mail
yeah.
has to go somewhere. So your,
True.
you know, your licenses, your payroll, whatever contracts are going to be sent somewhere. Now,
Yes.
it might be a PO box that then gets forwarded to, you know, the controller's home address.
Mhm.
But you're going to be representing yourself somewhere, right?
Yes.
Um, so you need to kind of, if you have the ability to be strategic about that, be strategic about that. Like, what does it mean to register in Texas versus California versus Oregon, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and also kind of don't go kind of cuckoo bananas on over compliance. So we've had a lot of kind of tech startups or companies that kind of get their lawyers involved and they're like, well, we're just going to register you with the Secretary of State everywhere because like we're going to have people everywhere and or we're not, but we want to be able to bid on these contracts or whatnot. We just want to be ready. And it's like, thank you, attorneys. One, you didn't tell us you were going to do that. Two, the fact that you register with the Secretary of State might trigger an income tax filing. So there was no reason for you to do that, we think,
Yeah.
just because like you can do that after the fact. So just, you know, there's that fine line of wanting to be
Yeah.
compliant versus, you know,
Going
over
cuckoo
compliance and
bananas.
overburdening yourself.
Yeah.
Um, and to the
I,
extent that like we have like reviewed contracts, you know, of
yeah.
that has like sales tax language in it, right? Because sales tax is
Yeah.
a transaction tax. So we'll be like, okay, well, what are
Yeah.
you allowed to do? What might you want to protect yourself from doing, even if you don't have a duty now? You know, what are your options for a sales tax integration software? How are you collecting payroll? We
Yeah.
have assisted a lot of companies. We don't process payroll, but we have helped companies get payroll registration so they can transition it, you know, to large I'm not going to throw names out there. I have my
Yeah.
opinions. That's an offline conversation. Um,
Yeah.
but there are third-party payroll providers that are very hands-off, but
Yeah.
also don't do a whole lot. They're not service oriented.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we can help you think through some of your vendor selections, some of your contract languages. Right now we're reviewing a, kind of digital company that they think that they're this, but then what they're billing for, it's like, well, this is really bad contract language. This is going to take you from this non-taxable bucket or this less taxable bucket into a 100% taxable bucket everywhere, and you've not collected or remitted.
Yeah.
So where are you? Let's really think about who you are, and kind of the earlier you know who you are, what you are, where you are,
Yep.
the better.
Well, I like that. I like that. I really like this. And I'm really thankful for you to be taking the time to share these insights on my podcast. It's been like incredibly useful for all of my listeners. I would definitely want to know from where you got the term cuckoo bananas, but I guess that's a conversation for another podcast. Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, well, sure. Like, what's funny is my daughter's soccer team, like years and
Hmm.
years ago, they called themselves the Cuckoo Bananas. But then another podcast I was listening to, with like two friends, one of the hosts said Cuckoo Bananas, like, oh my gosh, that was my daughter's soccer team like 2 years ago. Like, were they ahead of the curve on that? But I also love it because it's something to provide, right? When we talk to clients, they're very stressed out. They owe a lot of money. They are going to pay a lot of fees and that, but it's just something that just kind of like lightens the mood when you hear someone say cuckoo bananas, because it just
True.
also kind of speaks to the absurdity of some of the far reaches that states can do. And
True.
so it's that lightness with that like severity, and also that like level of like, yeah, we get it. Like we appreciate that this rule is ridiculous. And so I don't know. It's just kind of
No, it's no, it's good. It's good. In fact, I'll tell you, I have one of the podcasts of where I do on the mergers and acquisitions, and in one of the conversations with the gentleman, mergers and acquisitions is all about EBITDA, and he's like, he says, I never say EBITDA when I hear it for the first time with the client. I always say, like EBITDA dabba do. So it's kind of, but
Well, it's like
it
we're
does, it does,
accountants. We can't take ourselves
yeah,
that seriously, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
we're no longer the green visor, table lamp, hermit. Well, you
No,
know.
no.
So
We've
gotta
we've
throw
evolved
some
a
fun in
lot.
there every once in a while when you can.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, before I wrap up, I want to just thank all our listeners who might be realizing, okay, we probably have some salt exposure, because I'm pretty certain that's going to come into your mind. So, for all our listeners who would have got that question while they are listening to this podcast, that okay, there is some salt exposure I see from what has been told. What's the very first step that they should take?
Well, shameless plug, you can call us. Call, figure out a trusted state tax professional. And if we're not the right fit, we can send you, right? We got friends. Um,
Mm-hmm.
But it's not recommended to just kind of like bury your head in the sand. We'll generally talk to anyone, because we also like to know what businesses are out there, what software vendors are out there, to try to provide
Yeah,
that best available software, solutions to our clients. Right.
true.
So um try to, or if you're just like, I don't think it's in the budget to talk to someone, you know, dive in to figure out what you're doing. There's
Yeah,
a way to, again, who you are, where you are, what you are, um,
absolutely. Absolutely.
is kind of spend the time to dig in to what that is. But obviously, call us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Talk to Meredith, talk to the folks at TaxOps. Please do not ask generative AI.
No, I mean, you can find like if you we have appeared in the searches on AI because we put a lot of stuff out there. We
Yeah.
think we're amazing. We like to hear ourselves talk. We put a lot of stuff out there to help kind of educate the masses to the extent that we can. Um,
All
so
right.
so businesses have found us through AI, but yeah, in any good, internet research, go back to the source, right?
Yeah.
In your, search engine, a lot of times it's like this came from this link. And if it looks
Yeah.
trustworthy, click on it. But yeah,
All
just
right.
don't take the internet in all its glory,
Yeah.
at 100%
Yeah.
serious.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Now, we talked about you. We talked about, what you do at TaxOps. But tell us more about the work that you and your team are doing at TaxOps. How do you partner with businesses to help them navigate these challenges?
Yeah, so we kind of going back to the beginning, we talk to them, we listen to them, we figure out who they are, if they've got a problem. We help them understand their available options. There's programs. Every state has some variation of voluntary disclosure agreements, which is a program that you as a business can go to, typically through a representative, that says, hey, my bad, I have a problem. Let's work together and fix it. And so
Yeah.
typically what the states do is they have kind of a predetermined period that they'll go back. You pay your liabilities, they waive penalties, you pay interest, and then you commit to being a good faith taxpayer going forward.
All right.
And
Okay.
so we spend a ton of time working with clients on that.
Mhm.
We then help them, if they have a sales tax problem, we help them think through what could be a good option for them to integrate to collect kind of that sales tax. And we do that a lot of times in conjunction with voluntary disclosure agreements,
Yeah.
because once
Yeah.
you say that you're going to be a good faith taxpayer, well, you got to start putting tax on invoices,
Yeah.
and remitting it. So we help clients, kind of evaluate available options to them to be compliant. And then we spend a lot of time just talking to businesses. We spend a lot of
Mhm.
time teaching. We go to conferences to teach, and we go to conferences to learn.
Okay. Okay.
And yeah.
All right. Fair enough. All right. Now, you know, uh, if somebody wanted to know about you or get in touch with you, connect with you, because I'm pretty certain that's going to happen after this podcast. So, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
So you can always send me an email. I'm at msmith@taxops.com. But we
Mhm.
have a website, taxops.com. You can find us on YouTube and LinkedIn. You can read some of our content, listen
All right.
to our Saltivation podcast, which I generally host. So if you love the sound of my voice or you hate it, you can find me there. And we talked, and one of my coworkers will always kind of guest spot with me, and we talk to other kind of our friends,
Mhm.
and just kind of put the
All
word
right.
out. So yeah, you can find us that way.
All right, folks. Well, I'm going to be leaving the contact information, obviously not our email, but obviously you'll have those publicly available resources available in the show notes. So that way you know how to get in touch with Meredith. And with that, Meredith, we come to the wrap of today's podcast recording. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise. This is, I've been waiting to have this conversation with somebody who has got experience in Solve, because it's one of those areas that can be like intimidating, and you really helped to break it down. So thank you so much once again.
Well, thank you so much, Saul, for inviting us to be here. It was nice talking to you.
Thank you. And to our listeners as well, if you found this valuable, don't forget to subscribe and share this episode. And with that, I want to thank you all for your time. Until next time, take care and keep innovating in everything that you do. Cheers.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now